Every year, millions of people set goals, big ones, exciting ones. They write them down, they create vision boards, they set deadlines, and then most of them fail. Not because they're lazy, not because they didn't want it badly enough, but because they started in the wrong place. You see, we've been taught to chase outcomes, goals. But goals are results. They're not processes. And results don't happen just because we want them. They happen because we build systems, consistent actions that align with why we're doing it in the first place. So today, I'm not here to tell you to dream bigger. I'm here to tell you to think differently. Because if you truly want to change your life, stop setting goals and start building systems. Most people are taught to set goals. It's the first step in nearly every self-help book, productivity course, or motivational seminar. Define what you want. Set a clear target. Make it measurable, achievable, and time-bound. On the surface, this makes perfect sense. How can you hit a target if you don't know what you're aiming at? Goals give us direction, a sense of purpose, and a benchmark to measure progress. But there's a hidden flaw in this approach, one that often leads to frustration, inconsistency, and ultimately failure. Goals are outcomes. They are the end results we hope to achieve: run a marathon, lose 20 pounds, write a book, earn 6 figures, learn a new language. They define a future state that is different from our current reality. But simply stating an outcome doesn't move us any closer to it. It's just a wish with a deadline. The real question is, what are you doing every day to get there? This is where systems come in. A system is the collection of daily habits, routines, and processes that guide your behavior and ultimately determine your results. If a goal is the destination, a system is the road you travel on. Most people obsess over goals but pay little attention to the systems that support them. And that's the problem. You can set a goal to write a best-selling novel. But unless you develop a system of sitting down to write daily, editing consistently, and managing your time and energy, the goal remains a fantasy. You can set a goal to get fit. But unless you design a system that includes regular workouts, a manageable diet, and a sustainable lifestyle, your goal will be swallowed by inconsistency, procrastination, or burnout. When you focus on goals, you place your attention on something you can't directly control. You can't force yourself to lose 20 pounds today or write a book in an hour. These outcomes are achieved indirectly, through systems that are applied consistently over time. So instead of obsessing over results, shift your focus to building systems that make those results inevitable. Let's look at it another way. Imagine 2 people set the exact same goal to run a marathon in 6 months. One person writes it down, visualizes success, buys running shoes, and watches motivational videos. The other person builds a training schedule, blocks out time each morning to run, tracks their mileage, and adjusts their routine based on how their body responds. Which one do you think is more likely to succeed? The second person didn't just set a goal, they built a system. The irony is that goals can sometimes get in the way of long-term progress. That's because they create a kind of finish line in our minds. Once we reach it, the motivation often disappears. How many people do you know who trained for months to run a marathon, completed it, and then stopped running altogether? Or someone who lost weight for a wedding or event, then quickly reverted to old habits? That's the danger of outcome-based thinking. It's temporary. Systems, on the other hand, create a lifestyle. They focus on the process, not just the prize. There's another issue with goals. They can make you feel like a failure until you've achieved them. If your goal is to build a business that makes $1 million, every day you're not at $1 million can feel like you're behind, even if you're making steady progress. Goals have a binary nature. You've either hit the target or you haven't. This mindset can drain your motivation, especially when progress feels slow. Systems reframe that experience. If your system is to reach out to 5 new clients every day, improve your product weekly, and reinvest profits monthly, then every day you execute that system is a win, regardless of how close you are to the end goal. This doesn't mean goals are useless. They can provide direction and initial motivation. But once you know where you're going, forget about the goal and focus entirely on the system. It's the daily habits that matter most. Success isn't about the intensity of your goals, it's about the consistency of your actions. A well-designed system will take you further than the most ambitious goal ever will. Most people want the result without committing to the process. But in reality, the process is the result. The systems you build are what shape your identity, your character, and your outcomes. If you're a writer, it's not the book that defines you. It's the habit of writing. If you're an athlete, it's not the medal. It's the daily training. If you're a leader, it's not the position, it's the system of decision making, listening, and learning that defines your impact. This mindset shift from goals to systems may seem subtle, but it changes everything. It's the difference between someone who says, "I want to be healthy," and someone who builds a lifestyle around health. It's the difference between someone who wants to be successful and someone who acts successfully day after day, regardless of whether success has shown up yet. There's a powerful line, often repeated in high-performance circles. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. At first glance, it may seem like just another motivational quote, but this simple statement holds a deep truth about how we actually operate in the real world. It speaks to the difference between aspiration and execution, between vision and behavior, between outcome and process. Most people think that if they just dream big enough or want it badly enough, they'll somehow achieve what they're aiming for. But when pressure hits, when motivation dips, when circumstances change, we don't operate from our best intentions. We default to our most deeply ingrained habits, routines, and systems. This principle applies across every domain of life. In sports, the goal may be to win a championship, but the outcome is always determined by the quality of the training system. The discipline in recovery, the communication protocols among the team, and the day-to-day consistency that builds performance under pressure. In academics, students may have the goal to graduate with honors, but what carries them through isn't the ambition. It's the system of study habits, note-taking methods, time management routines, and coping mechanisms for stress. In business, founders may envision a thriving company, but no vision survives without the systems to hire effectively, manage operations, serve customers, and iterate on the product. When things go wrong, most people blame the goal. They say things like, "I guess I didn't want it enough," or "Maybe the goal was too big," or "Maybe I'm not cut out for this." But rarely do they examine the underlying system they were relying on. They don't look at how they were managing their time, how they structured their environment, how they built habits, how they tracked progress, or how they responded to setbacks. People are quick to adjust their goals, but slow to redesign their systems. And yet, it's the system that drives outcomes, not the goal itself. Think about a professional musician. The goal might be to perform on a world stage, but they don't get there by simply dreaming of standing under the spotlight. They get there by falling back again and again on their system, their warm-up routines, their practice schedules, their feedback loops, their sleep, diet, and even how they handle nerves and self-doubt. Under pressure, they don't rise magically to the occasion. They fall back to the level of preparation they've put in day after day. This is true not just of individuals, but of organizations. A company can have the goal to dominate its industry, but if it hasn't built the internal systems to scale its operations, manage culture, communicate strategy, and respond to change, that goal remains a fantasy. Vision without structure collapses under its own weight. Even military training is built on this idea. Soldiers don't train for specific situations. They build systems of thinking, reacting, and coordinating so that under chaos and confusion, they fall back to a trained, reliable system of response. That's how you create consistency under stress. In everyday life, this truth is often overlooked. People set goals to lose weight, for example, thinking that desire alone will carry them through. But then life gets busy, stress builds up, or motivation fades, and they revert to their default routines, skipping workouts, grabbing convenience foods, or staying up too late. It's not that the goal was wrong, it's that their system couldn't carry them when things got hard. The fallback system, what you default to under pressure, is what actually defines your progress. That's why people who achieve lasting change don't just change what they want. They change how they live. Systems are made up of small, repeatable actions. They include your environment, your schedule, your habits, your mindset, your support network, and your feedback mechanisms. These are the real engines of change. When a system is well designed, progress becomes natural and automatic. When a system is flawed, progress becomes a constant uphill battle. And the key realization is that when everything feels like a struggle, it's not because you're not trying hard enough. It's often because your system isn't working for you. And since people perform how they are trained, they will always fall to the level of what they've repeatedly practiced, not to what they've hoped will happen when the time comes. This explains why two people with the same goal can end up with very different outcomes. It's never just about the goal. It's about what kind of system they built around that goal. One person might rely solely on motivation, riding the high of inspiration until it fades. The other builds a process, one that works even on days when motivation is gone. That's the difference between temporary progress and sustainable change. When you truly internalize this idea, your focus starts to shift. You stop asking, what do I want to achieve? And start asking, what system do I need to build that makes success inevitable? You stop chasing intensity and start respecting consistency. You realize that showing up every day, doing the work, and refining your process is not just a path to your goal. It is the path. Goals set direction, but systems are what carry you forward. And under pressure, in the real moments that count, you won't suddenly become someone else. You'll become who you've trained yourself to be. Goals often feel exciting. They give us something to chase, something to dream about. They live in the future, a desired outcome that feels bold and motivating. But that excitement comes at a cost. Because while goals create pressure, systems create consistency. And in almost every meaningful pursuit, consistency matters more than intensity. The problem with relying on goals is that they often generate internal tension. The moment you set a goal, you create a gap between where you are and where you want to be. That gap, while motivating at first, can quickly turn into anxiety, self-doubt, or feelings of inadequacy when progress doesn't come fast enough. When someone sets a goal to lose weight, for example, they might feel highly motivated in the beginning. They clean out their pantry, join a gym, and start a diet with energy and discipline. But that motivation is tied to the pressure of the outcome. Every day becomes a test. Am I closer to my goal yet? If the scale doesn't move, or if results aren't visible, they feel like they're failing, even if they're putting in real effort. That pressure can become overwhelming. It leads to burnout, inconsistency, or quitting altogether. The pressure from goals often becomes counterproductive because it makes the process feel like a means to an end rather than something valuable in itself. Contrast that with someone who focuses on a system. Instead of obsessing over how many pounds they want to lose, they commit to preparing healthy meals every Sunday, walking every morning, drinking enough water, and going to bed on time. Their attention isn't on the final result, but on the daily process. There's no pressure to win the day. By meeting some visible benchmark, they just show up and follow the system. Over time, that system becomes a lifestyle. And with that lifestyle, the results often take care of themselves. This is how consistency gets built. Not through hype, but through habit. The same pattern shows up in creative work. A person might set a goal to write a book. That goal sounds impressive, and it feels inspiring. But the longer they go without completing chapters or hitting word counts, the more the pressure builds. Writer's block sets in, the fear of imperfection grows, and procrastination starts to win. The goal becomes a source of stress. But if instead they commit to writing 500 words a day, regardless of whether it's good or bad, they build a system. There's no daily judgment about the end result. There's just a practice, a rhythm. And over weeks and months, the book emerges almost as a byproduct of the system they've committed to. This is the power of systems. They remove the emotional volatility that goals often bring. Because with goals, every day you haven't achieved it feels like a failure. But with systems, every day you follow the process is a win. Systems provide stability, they create structure. They anchor you to action even when motivation is low or when you feel uncertain. Goals can feel like cliffs. Either you've reached the top or you haven't. Systems feel like pathways. Step by step, day by day, you keep moving forward. There's also a psychological shift that happens when you focus on systems instead of goals. With goals, your identity gets tied to the outcome. I want to be a millionaire. I want to be famous. I want to be in shape. But that identity is fragile because it depends on achieving something external. If you don't reach the goal, you question your worth or ability. But systems are rooted in behavior, not identity. I manage my money wisely. I create content consistently. I train and eat well. These are actions you can repeat regardless of whether the big goal has been met. And those actions reinforce a stronger, more grounded identity over time. In a professional environment, the difference is equally stark. A team might set a quarterly goal to increase sales by 20%. That target sounds ambitious, but it immediately creates pressure. Every week, the team measures themselves against a number. If sales dip, panic sets in. People work longer hours, chase leads desperately, and make reactive decisions, all in the name of hitting the goal. But without a system to support long-term growth, they burn out. Now imagine instead that the team focuses on refining their sales system. They build a process for qualifying leads, Improving outreach scripts, automating follow-ups, and strengthening client relationships. These aren't short bursts of effort. They're structural changes. And while the 20% growth might still happen, it won't be because of pressure. It will be because of consistency. What often gets misunderstood is that goals and systems are not opposites. They can work together, but one must lead. If the goal is the driver, pressure builds. But if the system is the driver, pressure dissolves. You can still set a direction, but the energy goes into the process, not the outcome. And that shift changes everything. It changes how you show up. It changes how you measure success. It changes how you respond when things don't go perfectly. Because with systems, progress becomes a matter of momentum, not motivation. Systems offer resilience. They carry you on days when you're tired, stressed, or uninspired. They turn effort into habit and habit into identity. And once something becomes part of who you are, it no longer takes willpower to do. It becomes natural. That's how real change happens. Not from the pressure of chasing outcomes, but from the quiet discipline of showing up over and over again. When people set goals, they're often imagining a future version of themselves. That future is usually exciting, upgraded, and more successful. The problem is, this mindset can unintentionally create short-term thinking. Because goals tend to make people focus on the destination, they often lose sight of the journey. The thinking becomes, what's the fastest way to get there? Rather than, what's the most sustainable way to grow into it? This creates a temptation to cut corners, skip fundamentals, and push for quick wins instead of long-term habits. People start asking questions like, how do I lose weight fast? Instead of, how do I create a lifestyle that supports health indefinitely? Or, how do I double my income this year? Instead of, how do I become the kind of person who creates lasting value over time? This short-term mindset can lead to behavior that actually undermines long-term success. Take fitness as an example. Someone sets a goal to lose 20 pounds in 8 weeks. The urgency of that goal pushes them into extreme diets, exhausting workouts, and unsustainable routines. They might see some results initially, but what happens when the 8 weeks are over? Often, they go back to their old patterns. Because the process wasn't designed to last, it was only built to hit a number. The goal was temporary, so the behavior was temporary too. When we chase goals instead of building systems, we often build temporary success that can't survive real life. In the professional world, this same short-term mindset shows up in businesses that chase quarterly targets at the expense of long-term vision. A company might set a goal to increase profits by a certain percentage, and in the rush to hit that number, they cut costs in ways that hurt quality, lay off experienced staff, or push products out too soon. The result may look good on a spreadsheet, but it damages the foundation of the business. Customers lose trust. Employees lose morale. The long-term brand erodes, all in the name of a short-term win. The irony is that in trying to go faster, they actually go backwards. This tendency to favor goals over systems also impacts personal growth. When someone sets a goal to read 50 books this year, their focus can shift from learning and applying knowledge to simply checking titles off a list. Reading becomes a race instead of a transformation. They might rush through books, forget what they read, or skip harder material in favor of easier reads that are quicker to finish. The original purpose, to grow, to learn, to think deeply, gets sacrificed for the metric. This is how goals can unintentionally disconnect us from the deeper reason we started in the first place. Another issue with short-term thinking driven by goals is that it makes setbacks feel catastrophic. When your mindset is anchored in hitting a specific target by a specific time, any obstacle feels like a threat. A missed workout, a lost client, a bad week. These things start to feel like failure instead of just being part of the process. People who are locked into goal-oriented thinking often don't recover well from setbacks because they haven't built the flexibility that systems provide. Systems allow for bad days because they're built for the long run. A missed workout isn't a failure. It's just part of a consistent process. One-off day doesn't ruin the identity of someone who trains regularly, but it can feel like the end of the world to someone who's only thinking about reaching a number. Goals also invite a constant state of dissatisfaction. Until the target is hit, there's a sense of incompleteness. People start thinking they'll finally feel confident, happy, or successful once they reach the goal. But that's a moving target. Once they hit it, they quickly move on to the next one. This creates a cycle of chasing and never arriving. Systems, on the other hand, create a sense of fulfillment in the process itself. Progress becomes a reward. The work becomes meaningful, not just a means to an end. And that shift can lead to deeper satisfaction, more motivation, and more sustainable growth. Short-term thinking also blinds people to compounding results. Most meaningful changes take time. A strong body, a stable business, a creative career, these aren't things you build in 30 days. They are the result of small, consistent actions multiplied over months and years. But if you're constantly chasing short-term goals, you interrupt the compounding effect before it can work. You switch strategies too quickly. You give up before the curve turns upward. You sabotage long-term gains in pursuit of immediate wins. Systems protect you from this. They allow you to stay on the path even when results aren't immediate, because your focus isn't just on what you're getting. It's on what you're becoming. Many people say they lack discipline or willpower, but often what they really lack is a system that encourages long-term thinking. Systems reduce decision fatigue. They automate the right behaviors. They make it easier to stay consistent without having to constantly rely on motivation. When you think in terms of systems, you're not asking, what can I achieve this week? You're asking, what am I building this year? Who am I becoming over the next 5 years? That shift in time horizon completely changes how you act today. When goals dominate your thinking, everything becomes binary. You're either winning or losing. You're either close to the target or far from it. That black and white thinking can be mentally and emotionally exhausting. Systems introduce shades of gray. They allow space for growth, for learning, for iteration. You're not just trying to win once, you're trying to create a rhythm you can maintain over a lifetime. This rhythm is what creates mastery, resilience, and deep expertise. It's what separates people who burn out after quick success from those who build lasting legacies. Motivation is often seen as the fuel behind achievement. People wait for it, rely on it, and chase after it when it fades. It's the spark that gets you started, the feeling that tells you it's time to act. But the truth is, motivation is unreliable. It's inconsistent, emotional, and deeply affected by things outside of your control. You might wake up one day full of energy, ready to work toward your goals, and the next day feel completely unmotivated for no clear reason. If your success depends on how motivated you feel, your progress will always be unstable. This is where systems become powerful. Systems make progress inevitable, even when motivation fades. When you have a system, you don't need to feel inspired to take action. You just follow the process. The system becomes the structure that guides your behavior, even on days when you're tired, distracted, or emotionally off-center. And that consistency, over time, is what leads to meaningful results. While motivation fluctuates, systems provide stability. Consider someone trying to write a book. If they wait for motivation, they may write in bursts of energy, producing thousands of words on a good day and nothing for weeks after that. But someone who follows a system, writing 500 words every morning regardless of how they feel, will eventually finish the book even if they never feel particularly inspired. The progress might be slower in the short term, but it's steady, and steady wins over time. Writing becomes a part of their routine, not a response to emotional highs. The same principle applies in fitness. People often start strong when they feel motivated, new gym clothes, a fresh workout playlist, a strict diet plan. For a few days or weeks, everything feels exciting. But when soreness kicks in, when progress slows, or when life gets in the way, motivation tends to fade. And if that was the only thing driving action, the workouts stop, the routine collapses. But someone who has a system, going to the gym at the same time every day, following a structured plan, preparing meals ahead of time, is far more likely to continue even when they don't feel like it. The system carries them through the dips in motivation because it's built into their life. Systems work because they remove the need to decide every day whether you feel like doing something. When you rely on motivation, you're constantly negotiating with yourself. Should I do it today? Am I in the mood? Do I have the energy? These internal debates wear you down. But a system eliminates the question. If it's already part of your routine, something you've decided ahead of time, you don't have to think about it. You just show up. You execute. The emotional friction is removed, and that lowers the resistance to action. This doesn't mean that motivation is useless. It can be a great tool for getting started. It can provide the initial push to build momentum. But it's not the tool you should depend on for long-term success. Systems are what take over when motivation disappears. They act as the foundation, and the stronger your system, the less motivation you need. In fact, some of the most disciplined people in the world aren't more motivated than others. They've simply built better systems that reduce their reliance on willpower. Another benefit of systems is that they allow you to make progress even when life becomes unpredictable. If you've ever tried to pursue a goal during a busy season of life, you know how difficult it can be to stay motivated. Stress, fatigue, and distractions can quickly drain your energy. But if you have a system in place, a small, manageable routine that fits into your schedule, you can keep moving forward, even if only a little at a time. Over weeks and months, those small actions compound, they build momentum, and they keep you in the game, which is more important than making big leaps every now and then. Progress doesn't come from occasional bursts of energy. It comes from consistent, repeated effort. And the only way to maintain that kind of consistency is through systems. Systems create habits. Habits reduce the need for motivation. And that chain of events creates long-term growth. It's why someone who practices the piano for 20 minutes a day will outperform someone who plays for hours but only once in a while. The daily practice, even when it feels boring or unproductive, builds skill through repetition. The system takes over where motivation leaves off. Even in creative fields, where people often argue that you need to feel inspired to do great work, systems still matter. Many successful artists, writers, and musicians don't wait for inspiration. They sit down at the same time every day and create. Sometimes what they produce is great, sometimes it's not. But by showing up consistently, they increase their chances of capturing something meaningful. Their system gives them more opportunities for success because it keeps them in motion. Systems also provide a feedback loop. When you stick to a system, you can track what works and what doesn't. You can adjust the routine, improve the process, and refine your approach. Without a system, your efforts are scattered and your ability to learn from experience is limited. But with a system, every action becomes part of a larger pattern. That pattern leads to learning, and that learning leads to better results over time.